These were people so brave in battle, it was as if they had no fear of death. The Romans dismissed this as the unthinking courage of savages. But they were wrong. The people of ancient Britain had a system of belief which had helped them come to terms with their own mortality. In AD 60, Queen Boudicca led a violent revolt against the Roman invaders. The Romans were unable to defend themselves. They were preoccupied hundreds of miles away on the island of Anglesey, the last home of the Druids. These mysterious priests were the inheritors of a religion which had been at the center of British lives for thousands of years. In one battle, the Romans killed them all. Why were the Romans more interested in suppressing this bunch of priests than defending their heartland? What secrets did this religion hold? And what threat could it possibly have posed to the mighty Romans? I'm an archaeologist, and I've spent the last 30 years studying our prehistoric past. This is a massively undervalued part of our nation's history. Contrary to the traditional view of ancient Britain as a land of barbaric savages, civilized by the Romans, I have discovered a country isolated from the rest of Europe, which developed a hugely successful and uniquely British agriculture and industry. But the world of ancient Britain was about far more than technical achievement. People also had a rich spiritual life. These monuments are a mysterious part of our ancient past, which we have never fully understood. But we are directly descended from the people who built these strange places. And I believe understanding them will shed light on who we are today. It won't be easy. This was a religion without a Bible. Their priests valued memory over the written word. When the Romans killed off the Druids, they cut the only direct link we had to our ancient past. The British countryside is strewn with the remains of this ancient religion. It's just a question of knowing where to look. Throughout my archaeological career, I have found evidence that the people of ancient Britain believed in supernatural worlds. It was at Flag Fen in East Anglia, where I was directing excavations, that I first discovered traces of this other world. This is the place where I made the discovery. I was having a look at a Roman road which crossed a dike. So I took my people down here and we started examining the edge of the dike. Well, we'd barely started when I caught my foot on a large lump of cut wood which lay in the mud on the top of the dike. It had been sharpened with a narrow-bladed axe, and it was made out of oak. Now, oaks simply won't grow in the wet fen, so I was very suspicious. I slid down the side of the dike and found more wood, which was about 1 meter below the bottom of the Roman road. Now, that told me that this new wood was about 1,000 years earlier than the Roman road. And this is what it was, one piece of an ancient trackway. These posts were driven into the ground nearly 3,500 years ago. But this is just a tiny fragment of the entire site. It extends in that direction for about 200 meters and in that direction for upwards of 1 kilometer. So it was a massive undertaking. Now, it has to be a causeway, but at certain key times of the year, it had a special role. We have found over 300 pieces of bronze metalwork here. Swords, daggers, spears. Now, these weren't objects that were lost. They were carefully placed in the ground for a specific reason. This is a scale replica of what you'd have seen here at Flag Fen around 1300 BC. I'm standing on an artificial island that was made out of timber and brushwood. And running up to me across the watery fen is a causeway constructed from massive oak timbers. It was amongst these timbers that we found hundreds of valuable items that had been carefully and reverently placed in the water. Virtually unused prehistoric objects like these are found all over Britain. People have tried to explain by suggesting that objects were deliberately destroyed in order to keep their market value high. But I don't think so. These objects were being passed through the water or the earth into another world. Every time somebody decides to build a road or a housing estate, or in the case of C. Henge here, takes a stroll along the beach, something turns up. In 1998, coastal erosion revealed something very strange indeed on a beach in Norfolk. The trunk of a huge oak tree emerged from the sea, surrounded by a circle of 55 wooden posts. The trunk had been deliberately placed upside down in the ground. Its circular shape was as important to the ancient Britons as the cross is to Christians. It was a symbol of a religion which had a very particular perception of life and the afterlife. "4,000 years ago, this monument stood on dry land. I think that the strange inverted tree trunk is being offered to another world, which lies beneath the ground. I still find the memory of that huge upside-down tree strangely eerie and compelling. It was cut down in the spring, in the full flush of life, and it was transferring its life forces deep into the ground to an underworld. It was the prehistoric heaven. To Christians, heaven is up there in the sky, but in the past, it was down there. One of the things that the Romans couldn't believe when they arrived in Britain was how the native people seemed to have no fear of death. So brave were the warriors. Such bravery was armor no weapon could penetrate. Was it these strange beliefs which had helped the ancient Britons to conquer their fear of death? It's 5,000 years ago. Britain is in the last stages of the Stone Age. The population has grown rapidly, and the people have recently started farming their land. The Great Pyramids of Egypt have yet to be built. There is an explosion of wood, stone and earth structures across the British landscape. These circular monuments are unlike anything else found in the ancient world, and they have mystified archaeologists for decades. intriguing new evidence has begun to reveal how these places might have been used. On South Uist, in the Western Isles of Scotland, archaeologist Mike Parker-Pearson has just uncovered the remains of an ancient village where he's made some very macabre discoveries.
It's basically a little community who were living in the sand about 1300 BC, 3,000 years ago. It actually starts not as a settlement, but as a cemetery. They're living on top of a cremation ground.
That's almost unheard of.
I'm pretty certain it's deliberate, because it's not simply that the house is built on top of the cemetery. Its central hearth is right on top of one of the cremation burials. When that house went out of use, somebody came along and actually dug a little hole down and quarried into the side to get up underneath the cremation burial. They must have known it was there, and they were either looking for something or trying to contact somebody in the beyond. Really quite strange.
Mike has excavated 3 houses here. Interestingly, all 3 were circular.
That's right. And then we have the northeast.
But what's extraordinary is that in the northeast corner of each house, there was a strange human burial.
Where we found a skeleton lying on its side in a crouched position. The big surprise was over there, where we had a dead woman.
A dead woman?
Middle-aged woman, buried in a pit, holding 2 of her teeth, strangely enough. The association with death doesn't stop there. Just here, in the top of a post hole, there was a newborn baby, pressed down on its face, looking out the doorway. And then just to cap it all, this house outside has a cremation platform where they actually burnt the dead.
Were these gruesome burials murders? Were they trophies? Sacrifices? These bodies were a clue to understanding the meaning of this strange religion. In order to find out more, I travelled to another outpost of the British Isles, to Orkney. The Roman invaders never got as far north as Orkney. They'd been led to believe that this remote spot was occupied by primitive bog people. They were quite wrong. This rock is amazing stuff. It naturally splits into handy brick-sized lumps like this, or you can have it in huge slabs to put on your roof. The wind here is so severe that trees simply can't thrive, so you have to build your entire buildings out of stone like this. And that's why ancient buildings and tombs in Orkney survive better than almost anywhere else in Europe. In the 1930s, harsh storms uncovered the oldest stone houses in northwestern Europe. These 2 houses were built nearly 6,000 years ago. That's 13 centuries before the pyramids. There was a little corridor here to keep the wind out. Now, the walls were divided up by these slabs known as stalls. There's a hearth in the middle here. This was actually where the food was prepared. The end room here was probably a storage room with lots of cupboard space, sort of fitted kitchen idea. Early houses were oblong in shape, but over time the design becomes circular. Round houses, like these at Skara Brae, would have existed all over Britain, but being built in wood, they vanished. Within the circular shape of these buildings, a formal pattern is clear. An elaborate dresser